If you're anything like I was, you've got a pedal board full of mismatched patch cables that are a little spotty from gig to another. You're always hunting for one that's going bad. They don't fit. You can't squeeze enough pedals on your pedal board. That's how I was until I discovered Tour Gear Design's patch cables. They're the smallest patch cables in the game. They're rock solid, extremely dependable, and I love what they make. And now I've partnered with Tour Gear Designs to get you 10% off your order by using the affiliate code down below in the description box. You can get 10% off using code 40WATT, 40WATT, but this deal gets even better. For my Patreon supporters, you actually are eligible for 20% off. You have to register with the same email address you use on Patreon and message the company, say you're one of my Patreon supporters, and you can get 20% off your order with Tour Gear Designs, the best patch cables in the game. This podcast is made possible in part through a partnership with TrueFire. TrueFire is the most comprehensive guitar learning experience on the internet, with over 51,000 guitar lessons from the best educators in the world. It makes TrueFire the #1 most trusted music education resource for guitar players. We as guitar players sometimes get fixated on the gear that we play, and we neglect the skill level that we play. And many of us have a hard time finding instructors locally. TrueFire bridges that gap. You can find my affiliate link below to get 40% off with my code 40WATT of your first purchase through TrueFire. Learn, practice, play, TrueFire. This podcast is made possible by the support of many wonderful people over on Patreon. If you would like to support this show and help make sure it keeps going, you can go over to patreon.com/40wattpodcast, where for as little as $3 a month, you can help make sure this show keeps happening. Thank you for all of your support. Ladies and gentlemen, 40 Watters, welcome to another episode of the 40 Watt Podcast. I'm so glad you've come back to join us. This week's going to be a fun one. I can already tell by the beginning conversation before I hit record. We actually had to stop ourselves 3 times before we just started talking about things. And I'm like, oh, shit, that's going to be good podcast material. So we're going to stop here and we're going to hit record. So I'm going to do this quickly and go through the intro as fast as I can. Not that I don't want to call out every single one of my Patreon supporters, because I'm going to. Especially I got a couple of new names this week that's super exciting. I'm always thankful anytime somebody wants to bring a little support to this podcast for 1 month, 2 months. I've got a couple of people who have been on board for 3 years now. They've been on board since I started. I don't know why, but thank you. But do want to mention a couple of things. There are some links down below. You will find links for discount code for TrueFire to get some lessons, because y'all all need lessons more than you need new gear. Yeah, I said it. There's also links down there for Reverb. It's an affiliate link. There's a link for Stringjoy Strings. If I remembered to put it in this week, I talked about it last week and I forgot. And there's also a link down there for Tour Gear Design patch cables, which I'm about to place like a $200 patch cable order. Thankfully, with my code, I get 10% off. And if you're a Patreon supporter, remember, you can get 20% off. You just have to email them, and they'll email me to confirm you're an active Patreon supporter. So, Patreon, speaking of Patreon, I need to thank some people. So the list is getting long. At some point, I'm going to start singing it like Joe over at the Guitar Nerds did for a while. But actually, it is a very specific order. I just won't say it. Thank you very much to new Patreon supporters, Benjamin Rodway, Jamie Evans, and returning Patreon supporters, Hendry Klubakowski, Brian May, not that Brian May, Heinrich Nordvang of Nordvang Custom Pedals, Tony DeGraw, Steve Rao of 60 Cycle Hum, Andrew Bimson, Julie McFarling of Labland Photography, Abe Matthews, Jordan Galash, Duncan Watson, Andy Johns, Dave Evangelista of the Guitar Nerds podcast, Blake Jefferson, Nick Call, Andrew Hensley, Alan Gresham, Dan Pilver of Lewitt Audio, Andy Koenig, Scott Hamilton of the Effects Loop podcast, Jim Burns, Tom Kelly, Heath Batt, Ben Fair of Electromotive Sound Pedals, Rick Calhoun of Honey Picks, Jeffrey Walks, and Kyle Harris. Thank you very much for your support and keeping the show on the rails, because I do my very best to derail it every week. Speaking of derailing, this week I have Mark from Summer School. Is it effects or pedals? Electronics. Look, my original words were all wrong. It's fine. Titles, all my listeners know I don't. My ADHD doesn't let me remember things anyway. So, Mark, how are you?
I'm wonderful. I mean, I'm at the end of a school week, so it's Friday, so when we're recording, so it's pretty good.
Yeah. So it's interesting because we were talking about that. I'm having a day. Like we had to postpone recording for an extra hour because I've had things going on today. Thought my house was gonna blow up. Literally, y'all. I'm not kidding. We had like a gas thing. Anyway, it's not a problem. House is still here. We're good. It's all checked out. So
All
I've
the
had a
gear is
day.
still there, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Everything's still here,
All right.
thankfully. And after we're done recording, I'm going to do my best to destroy a bottle of bourbon because of my nerves. No, I'm just kidding. I don't recommend using alcohol to treat your anxiety. Um, but I was telling Mark, I almost told you before we started this episode, I used to be the assistant manager at a blues bar, right?
Okay.
For years. And I was also the audio engineer. And the number one drinking profession that came in the bar was always educators. It was always teachers.
I have had like when I started working at the school I'm at now. Uh, Quickly as soon as they learned like, oh, you're in a band. I'm like, yeah, and they're like, where are you playing? I'm like, oh, we're playing whatever bar on this like Friday, whatever. Like they packed it that whole first night,
That's
and I was
awesome.
like, oh, they're like, yeah, we should do this again. I'm like, all right, cool. Like some of those people, I mean, people have lives and kids and stuff. But I was like, when they have the night where everything lines up, they're like, we're here to party. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
cool. So yeah, it's always fun when we have the teachers come out for certain shows.
Yeah, no, it was fun. I remember I've told this story. I was working at the bar and it was a night that I was off, right? But I'm still at the bar because, it's small town. What
Yeah,
else am I going to do? The only difference between a night I'm working and a night I'm not is that I'm drinking on the nights I'm not.
yeah.
Um, I still end up washing dishes somehow inexplicably. Um, but I was drinking, hanging out with this group, and like how you make your bar friends like
Yeah.
on a night maybe you went by yourself and you find a group of friends, and I'm like hanging out with these folks and I find out they're all teachers, including one of them is the principal of the school I work at, like totally blowing off steam, and they're like my age. I'm like, you're like, I don't get it. That was when the illusion of teachers really broke for me. Like
Yeah.
it finally shattered that whole. I went to Catholic elementary school, so it really shattered some things for me.
It's funny,
Not that I,
like
not that I thought Sister Marguerite or Sister Mary were out on drinking on the weekends, but
yeah, right. No, it's funny. Like, I never thought I would be a teacher, and I was like teaching guitar and drum lessons and stuff. And one of the guys I was teaching him drums. He was uh like a third grade teacher, and he was like, "You should come." He's like, "You should be a teacher." I'm like, "I'm not gonna do that." I'm like, "I never want to do that." And he's like, "Come hang out in my room for a day. It's great. You get summers off. You can like go on tour and do what you got to do. Like, come do it." And I went to his room, and he taught third grade, and he's like, yeah, he's like, I do math for a while. The kids get bored of math. I get bored of math. All right, now we're gonna read. We read a story. They get bored. I get bored. Now we do science. I'm like, oh, I could do that. And I was like, oh, and that's fell into that profession. So,
so do you teach elementary school? Is that
so I teach math, AIS, and special ed. So what that
okay?
means is academic intervention services. So I have second grade through eighth grade. All your kids that don't like math and aren't great at math, come see me for more math. So,
Oh, you're real popular.
oh yeah, I'm like, well, you know what? I have kids showing up to my room with smiles on their face, so I think that's a pretty good achievement. The fact that I can get that, so I'm like, it's more confidence than it is. I'm like, we get you confident. We can go from there. So
No, that is significant. But I feel like that leads us directly into I think we can all speculate on where the name of your pedal company came from. Uh,
yeah,
although I do have to, so I saw Nick from Wonder
oh
Effects did
yeah,
a Instagram
yeah,
reel, and he's roasting pedal companies, and it's like the most polite roasts ever.
yeah.
I love Nick, and he roasted you and said, "You named your pedal company." Let's see what he said. Literally the worst thing I could imagine, like the nightmare for every school age child. Summer school electronics.
Well, so I mean, the whole name of it was so I mean, even before that, I started building pedals during COVID. So it was like I was teaching, and then when summer hit, and I was like, well, there's no gigs, and I don't have to
Yeah.
teach out, so I need something to do all day. And I'm like, I could start buying like Lego kits on eBay, but my wife's gonna be like, why are there so many Legos in the house? Like that's so I was like, I'll buy like a BYOC pedal kit. And so I started building clones, and then I was eventually like, I want to make a pedal with my dog on it. So I'm like, I'm going to try this. And I was like, I need a name for whatever I'm going to call this thing. And I couldn't think of anything, and it was getting to the end of the school year. And so when it gets there, all the teachers start going around being like, who's teaching summer school? Are you doing summer school? Are you doing summer school? And I was just like, well, I'll probably just build these pedals all summer. That's going to be like my projects. I'm like, I got my own summer school. I got my own thing going on. And the more I thought about it, I was like, well, when I was in grad school, they had told us a thing of like, doctors and teachers. Everyone thinks that they can do your job because everybody went to school and everybody's been sick. And I was like, oh, so if we can't, so like by taking this name, like everybody has some connection to summer school. And like once we started doing the thing with like naming the pedals, like the pep rally, the science fair, the snow day delay, like everybody will see like the pep rally, and like we all have different memories, but we all have some connection to like doing that in school. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so I was like, on a marketing level, I think it kind of works, and it totally ties into like, yeah, I'm a teacher, and this, and I originally I was like, and I'll just build in the summer. That'll be great. Fast forward like 3 months, I'm like, I have to build like all of the time. Just like, I'm like, it's like a second full-time job now.
Yeah. No, because you've got a bunch of offerings now, but touching on the naming thing, that makes sense because one of the things that people want to do with a brand, they want to find a way to connect to people.
Yeah.
They need to build, whether it's you just want to build where they remember who you are. You want to, when I say build, obviously, listeners, I'm not meaning like physically building. I mean like community building. You're building some support and some connection to whatever it is you make. Someone like Nick at Wonder Effects. I mean, I still think back to the Wonder Bread pedal that he built, and I'm like, or you build something that's going to connect to people. I like what Zach over at Mythos does with the whole Greek myth, and not just all Greek myth, but just those kinds of things. Yours is built in, whether it's a positive or a negative memory of summer school, or the other celebration of missing it.
I was like, I have a feeling a lot of guitar players probably attended summer school at some point. So I'm pretty sure, no judgments. I completely get it, and I'm like, I feel like a lot of people are gonna be like, yeah, I get that. Like,
yeah,
even if you're not a teacher, I think you'll be like, yeah.
I did pretty well in school, and I think it's because I didn't start playing guitar until I was a senior in high school. That's why.
Yeah, right.
Because I definitely was trash in my first few years of college. I mean, listeners, I'm not ashamed to tell you, because I tell anybody who wants to talk about it, I flunked out of college twice.
I mean, I came pretty close when I started. Like, I thought I was going to go for engineering, and I'm like, nope, that didn't work. And then I switched to music, and then later went back for teaching. So, like, the fact that now I can like build pedals, I was like, I made it. I took the scenic route, but I didn't get that engineering degree. But it's like pretend engineer. I figured it out. It's okay.
Micro engineering.
It's yeah. I played a gig in the town where I went to college, and I was like, all these people are listening to my pedals right now. That checks some box. Somehow I did it. It makes me feel good.
No. That sounds like success to me. I'm just saying.
I'll take it.
I originally went into college thinking I would go into computer science of some kind. Right? We're talking 1999.
Mm-hmm.
Computer science in 1999. Y'all, we didn't have 64-bit processors available to the public in 1999. So just we're putting that in perspective. Dial-up at my university or internet at my university was still dial-up. They gave you a phone number to dial in to access the school's internet.
I remember we had dial-up at home, but at school they had just gotten like broadband. So the first time I like opened Internet Explorer in college, I'm like, this is amazing. Then I'd go home and be like, this sucks.
Right? Yeah, but the most I've ever done with that degree at this point is build gaming computers. Hey. That's what I did.
That's great, though.
But I changed majors so many times, y'all. I took the truly scenic route. Like, there's the scenic route, and then there's, can I actually get lost? Is that possible? Let's find out.
I feel like that's I don't know. I know this is a gear podcast and we're talking education, but I feel like that's a very important thing.
It's a life podcast.
Oh, there you go. I feel like that's super important. Like, you should try different things that you are somewhat interested in. And like, I remember taking like an engineering class, and they're showing like all the classes you take like later, like in the sequence. And there was a thing at the end, and it said like technical elective or something. Like, oh, an elective. I'm like, I could take like a music theory class or something that I would be interested in. They're like, oh no, it's a technical elective, so you could like build a boat out of cement and see how that works. I'm like, cool, that'll be real fun. Like, maybe this isn't for me. And like, yeah, I'm like, I have some other interests that I think would be neat, but all right.
It's like those classes where they just call it special project.
Yeah.
Like
And
there's and then it's like, oh no, you can do whatever you want. You're like, oh, I could do no, well, no, it's whatever you want as approved by a
well,
professor or your dean or whatever.
and then I took that we had like a MIDI lab class, and they had they were using like an early version of Sonar. It was like the DAW to use for it, and I was like, yeah, you just like meet the first class, and we give you a bunch of projects to do, and you just got to have those done by like the last class. To just have it done. So you would go, and I'm like, I'm just making my band's album here, like using this to like record everything. I'm like, this is great. So I was like, all right, here's my final
Oh, that's
project, and they're like,
oh, that's awesome.
oh, fine, there you go. I'm like, cool.
I took art in college. I took art 101. There was a time in my life where I was really into painting and sketching. I had a great art teacher in middle school, but he passed and I sort of lost interest after he
Mm,
wasn't my instructor anymore, one of those kinds of
yeah,
teachers. But so I was like, oh well, I need a fine art of some kind. And so art appreciation. I didn't want to take music appreciation because I'd seen the textbook and I was like, I'm not going to learn anything in this
yeah, right.
class. There was also a class. It was offered later after I'd gone back to school because I did. I flunked out and worked for a while. Went back to school as a music major. Finally, well, music and audio engineering.
Mm,
And there was a course that called History of Rock and Roll. I was like, I'm gonna take that. And I talked to the professor, and she said, "No, you're not," because she was like, "That is a waste of your time."
yeah,
And
you know this, right?
I took that like as a point of pride, but also like I really wanted that easy A,
Yeah, it
real
would
bad,
could really do me a favor right now.
right?
That's
So,
funny.
but I took art, and I had flunked art the first time I went to college. It was not because it was hard, but it was because it was I flunked out the first time because I was a I was a bad student
Yeah,
in
you
high
just weren't
school because
you weren't
things
ready.
came easy. Yeah,
Yeah,
I wasn't ready. Things came easy, and I skipped a lot of classes in college, and it turns out those count against you.
they
Uh,
that'll get
yeah,
you.
and so they cut me out. I didn't actually fail,
Yeah,
but I got cut out of all my classes, and one of them was art. So I had to retake Art 101, and thankfully my new professor, he was very much that here's the list of projects we're going to finish over the course of this semester. You've just got to get these done.
yeah, that's the
And
best.
if that meant you come to class and work on them, awesome. If that means you come to him and ask for specific instructions on a thing you want to do for a whatever, that's what you do as long as you turn them in and you got the concepts. I love those kinds of classes.
Well, that's one of the perks of what I do at school is that it's just like when you have the kids who like the math textbook doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
So like I have a it's I mean my just from the position administration stuff, they're very like free with what I get to do to like help the kids out because it is so many things where it's like, yeah, you learned this. I'm like, we can hammer this all day. It's not going to work. I'm like, so let's come up with a totally different thing. And this works for you. You do that the rest of your life. That works for you. Go for it. You know what I mean? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that more schools need to like do that.
Because
You know?
it turns out that's how the real world works.
Yeah. Well, and it's I tell the kids they're just like math sucks. I'm like, sure does. And they're like, it's really hard. I'm like, oh, totally. Yes, it very much is. And they're like, wait a minute. I'm like, I failed a lot of classes. Like, all the pain that you have. Like, yeah, I did that, man. So I know what you're going through. So let's use that to build something here. Let's go. And I'm like, I think that's a skill that like people who go into certain fields that they've always been good at don't know what it's like to struggle.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of times where kids like try something and they're like, I totally bombed this. I'm like, well, you should. You've never done it before. Like, it would be terrifying if you were amazing at it right out of the gate. Like, that's like
Yeah.
playing music. Like, your first guitar lesson, you're like, my fingers hurt. and my guitar sounds like crap. I'm like, yeah. What did you think? Like that's
My hands don't want to make this chord. Well,
they
yeah,
shouldn't. They
they
shouldn't do
shouldn't.
that.
This isn't natural.
You're a human being. Those don't. They're not meant to go that way. You have to make that happen.
I'm reminded of the meme that passes around again every so often, and it's the meme that says, "I didn't know I was expected to have this down by my second rodeo." That feels like a very low number of rodeos.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Yeah,
That's
like
completely right.
you're gonna suck at something for a while, and I'm one of those people, and I know a lot of people are. They don't like being awful at something, and so they have a hard time learning new skills because they feel bad at it at first. You're
Yeah,
supposed to, and to bring it actually around a gear. Similarly, it's this. I've been in this very slow work in progress, learning to read schematics, learning to identify components. Not that I want to do what you lunatics do and start a pedal company, because you're all lunatics.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I just got through talking with Haley from Rocket Music Gear. She doesn't make pedals. She's still a lunatic, just starting a company and doing what she's doing. All of you lunatics. But you're gonna be bad at it. You got to do it a bunch before
yeah.
you're any good at it. And I think that's really important. My wife is worse than me, and she won't listen to this, so that's okay. I know I can say this. I say this to her too, though. She picked up guitar one day, and I literally showed her a few chords, and within a half hour she's playing a song,
I'd
and
be
I'm like, I
furious.
hate you so much right now. But then she has literally not touched a guitar again since that day. And the thing was, she was upset she wasn't better at it to start. I was like,
That's not the normal journey that we go on.
right. And the same thing happened. I had an electronic drum kit, and she was like, "Oh, I'll try to learn to play drums." And she didn't quite catch on as quickly with drums as she did guitar,
Yeah,
because that's totally not natural. And so she just like, nah. And what it really was, she didn't like that she wasn't instantly good at
yeah,
it.
I get that.
Yeah,
Well,
it's fair.
it totally is. Like so I played drums before I played guitar. Like that was
Okay.
my whole like intro to music and all that. And like I remember I had like a concert. Like I had taken a few lessons at school, and then I went to junior high, and they were like, "Well, you're just part of a concert band now. Go play in the drums." So it's like you're in a new school with all these kids, and you're like playing. You don't totally know how to read music, and they're like, "You playing this now? Go play." And I remember like just being terrible. I didn't know like what's cut time. I didn't know like what that actually meant, and then like just getting like berated by the conductor teacher of the class. I'm like, okay. And I remember going home like so mad to like I had a drum kit, but I didn't really know like it was like a birthday present. Like I didn't really know how to really play yet. And it was like hitting stuff and suddenly like do da. I'm like, oh my god, just like this anger just led to just like I can play drums now. I figured it out, and it was just like I can play Nirvana songs. Oh my god! And it was just like this door just opened, but it was like suck, 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 and then you're like, oh, I just figured it out. That why did it take so long? I got this now.
Yeah, it's always some weird click that
Yeah,
something clicked all of a sudden. And no, you weren't instantly the best drummer or best
yeah.
guitarist or whatever, but it was that click for your brain to go, "Oh, I
I
took
see it
this
this way.
thing that I was terrible at, and I just did something that actually came across as musical."
Yeah,
And that there's nothing. I've been chasing that endorphin hit the
totally.
rest of my entire life.
It's
I remember it for me. I remember my exact moment. Um, I am a massive Garth Brooks fan. I have no shame
mm,
in saying it. I was a '90s kid,
I get it.
'90s country music. Loved Garth Brooks, and there's a song, I don't remember what record, and that surprises none of my listeners. But there's a song called "The Night I Called the Old Man Out," and it's this very like come of age song about a teenage kid who basically finally stood up to his dad and like
Hmm.
did the whole like man up to his dad thing, and his it's basically child abuse. It's a
Yeah,
song about
it's
child
like,
abuse. Let's be really honest. He was a teenager and his dad knocked him down. But there's this intro riff. No, that's a different one. It's I can still play it, but I can't like sing it right now. But
We'll add it
I
in
remember
post.
learning that lick, and like the first time I actually played it, I was like, "That's it. That's what it's supposed to sound like." And I had this like whole moment of like, "I'm a guitar player."
Yeah. I have a title now. I can do
Right.
this. Yeah,
Right. Exactly.
it's
So
it's wild, man. That like there's like those little things like that, or like I remember my first band when we like tried out for a talent show and we didn't get in, but just playing at the tryout was like there was like some battle of the bands or something. But just I remember leaving just the tryout, like we played in front of people, and it's like you look like you just did like every drug that you could ever take. So you're just like on cloud nine, and like, we just did it. We played music, and it sounded like music, and people heard music, and they treated it like music, but it was us. And you're like, yeah, it's the
it's
weirdest
the
thing.
coolest moment. Yeah, it's the coolest moment. And like, the next like big moment for me after that was because you remember these moments. You
Oh,
like you just
totally.
did. Like you remember that time. You didn't even get in.
I know.
Like you just remember that moment.
I can't even imagine how horrible we actually sounded. I'm sure. I'm sure they're like, it wasn't music. That wasn't. But like in our
Right.
brain, it sounded okay.
You were rock stars.
Yeah,
You're in that moment
for those
because
three
you
minutes.
did it. Yeah, for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
For me, it was I was a buddy of mine's band was playing a bar in my hometown, and I had gone just to hang out, and he invited me to sit in and sing and play guitar for
Mhm.
a song. And I had not really done that as like I'd played in bands like as a backup and second guitar, mostly fill in stuff, but I'd not sang and been like the front person
Yeah.
like that, like in this scenario. And I remember we played Johnny Be Good, good old Chuck Berry tune,
Hmm.
and people danced and had a great time. And there was a moment in my brain, people are actually dancing to music I'm making. And there was like this brain explosion
Yeah.
of this is the coolest shit I have ever experienced in my entire life.
It's always a weird thing when I talk to musicians who are like, they play a gig, and they're like, how'd the gig go? And they're like, it's terrible. Like, audience wasn't into it. They weren't dancing. And I'm like, that's your job. Like, your job is to make them dance. If you go and they're not dancing, you're not working hard enough. Like, we've done tons of gigs where it's like, they're just having their dreams. I'm like, all right, well, if we start having fun and do our jobs, we get the room dancing. And I was thinking that's weird. But yeah, because that is like the coolest thing when you do that, especially if like the gig starts and everyone's just like wallflowers. And then they start dancing. You're like, yes, this is a good gig.
And that's where and I know guitarists are particularly idealists,
Hmm.
and they're we love to be snooty about things like cover gigs, the stupid guitar tricks you do as a showman, and they're so dumb. There's
Oh
so
yeah,
many dumb things, and I used to have my own like bag of tricks as a blues musician. Shows can be a little bawdier than the average like rock cover band gig. You
sure.
know what I mean? Blues is a very uh y'all, it's all innuendo. It's
Yeah,
literally all innuendo, and you have to play into it. And you learn those tricks and you do those things, and it becomes a showmanship, and it becomes a little corny.
yeah,
It does. But at the same time, you're there to entertain people,
hmm,
and that entertains people. You're not there to impress the guitarist in the back of the room with his arms folded across his chest. Incidentally, just as a weird moment, I was at I'm librarian, public librarian. I was at a conference last week, and I was doing this big like 4.5 hour pre-conference that I was presenting at, and I was doing it, and part of it was I was talking about body language.
hmm,
I'm talking about customer service and how to be more approachable and how to provide better customer service. And I always talk about the whole folding the arms thing in front of you.
hmm,
And there was a guy in the back of the room standing up. There's about, I don't know, there's about 70, 80 people in this room, right? And there were plenty of chairs, but people get up, need to move a little bit. He's standing in the back of the room with his arms crossed. And I pointed him out. I'm going to use you as an example if you're illustrating my point.
yeah,
Uh, and I said, and you don't want to be like, and I mentioned this stereotype. I said, you don't want to be like this guy in the back of the room that is demonstrating the average guitar player when he goes see a cover band,
yeah.
standing in the back of the room with his arms crossed, judging the guitar player. And that's when he said, I'm actually a guitar player. I said, point proven.
Yeah.
Point proven.
I can pick them out anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I know my people.
Yeah.
So
Well, there was we have a thing around here. It's just like a local area, like music awards every year. Like everyone puts out albums. I'm sure a lot of towns have those things. And so they have a couple bands play, and like I've attended a couple times, and I've talked to people who are like, "Man, our band should totally play there." I'm like, "Why? The entire audience is other musicians in town. You think that's a good audience to play for? Like, you're gonna play your guitar solo, and the entire first 10 rows are like, Psh, I could do that." I'm like, why do you want that gig? That sounds like a miserable gig to play.
it could be either the most supportive gig you've ever played or the most judged gig you've ever played.
I was like, nobody's dancing. They're just sitting there like, I mean,
because musicians don't dance. We're on stage for a reason.
We're busy. Yeah, totally. It's so funny.
So I'm not a person who's ever had stage fright. Like stage fright's not a thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been wary of talking in front of people. It's a disease. Actually, it's far too much confidence for any one person. And it's not that I think I'm that good. It's just that somebody's got to do it. I'll stand up and talk.
Yeah.
Whatever. Or I'll be in this play, or I'll do this play in these bands, or do whatever. Never had the butterflies in my stomach feeling until I got to college and was a music major. And so there's not a lot of guitar. The school I went to didn't have a lot of ensembles with guitar. So basically I played in the same 3 groups every semester and sang in choir, right? Because I need these credits to graduate. And jazz band. So I'm the guitar player for the jazz band. I have never been more nervous than the first time I had to take an improvised solo at the jazz band recital in front of the entire music department. Like all the students, all the professors. I was like, oh, this is what that feels like.
Yeah. This is what everyone's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. It was wild.
Yeah,
so, I get it. I could not stand up in a room full of nothing but my region or my town's other musicians and not be completely self-conscious.
It's weird. So I play in a couple bands. I have an original band called Bridge Under Fire. It's like a post-hardcore punk rock, shouty, loud raucous band. And that's just all our originals, and I sing and play guitar there. And then I also play in a all 90s cover band called My So-Called Band. And
I love it already.
We do everything from Spice Girls to Rage Against the Machine and all that. And over the years, it's weird how my brain affects the two of them. Before the cover band goes to play, it's like, all right, another day at the office. Let's go play some Gin Blossoms into some Harvey Danger, and then we're gonna play some Backstreet Boys. But then the original band, it's like, all right, you go on and you hit that momentary these are my thoughts. This is my thing, and it's it's really the same job, but it just hits you, or me, it just hits me so different. Of I'll go play that thing that I've been playing since I was 16, versus here's something that has real feelings in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because that's the other thing is when you're doing a cover band, if somebody comes up to you, for example, I play in blues bands, jazz bands, and soul bands, and I've done all that kind of stuff over the years, and a bunch of other stuff. Listeners have heard me read off the list of projects I've worked with. But I was playing a blues gig, and someone said they were talking about songs they hate when bands play. I've got my list.
Yeah.
Right. And she's actually a disc jockey for a blues station in Arkansas. Really into the blues scene, and we were chatting, and I've known her a while and love her to death. But she said, "You know what song I really hate when bands play?" And she said, "Summertime." She said, "I hate it." And I play Summertime. I do. And I like playing that song. But you know what it didn't do? It didn't hurt my feelings.
No.
You want to know why? That's somebody else's song.
Yeah. It's not my song.
She didn't tell me she hates my song.
Well, that's the old joke when people are after cover gigs, they're like, you guys are my favorite band. You should probably like better bands. Like there's better bands that you should be liking more than us.
Right,
So
right. Let me, you should probably like the bands whose
yeah,
songs
like
we just covered.
I know what you're saying and I appreciate it, but we don't need that.
Right.
Our running joke for like 10 years, and we're like, oh man, best job I've ever had, worst band I've ever been in. All right, I get it. Like,
It's like we used to do a cover band, and we didn't stick to a decade, although a 90s cover band has been on my brain lately, like really wanting to dive in, because I think that's just me wanting to revisit my youth. Let's be
well,
honest, that's all that is.
it it,
Um,
it totally is, and like
yeah,
we when we got the whole idea together like 10 years ago, and we were doing it, it was like, okay, we'll do that because like all of our friends are still going to bars and they're getting like that's the gig, let's do it. And if we stick to that, then we don't have to play Skinnerd when someone wants to hear it. If someone is like,
right.
play some ACDC, we're like, the 90s stuff, that's what you want to hear? And they're like,
Yeah, no.
no. I'm like, yeah, me neither. So we're gonna play what we want. We'll play Foo
Yeah,
Fighters, how about that? And like you kind of go through and do that, but it was like we're just like, hey, the greatest decade of the last 30 years, because we're like, once it gets like the 2000s and like streaming came up, everybody's taste is so individually tailored that like
yeah.
you could name the top 40 right now, and I'm like, I probably haven't heard any of those songs
I have no idea.
because my
So
playlist is all what I want to hear. You know what I mean?
I live in Starkville, Mississippi, right? I live down here, middle of nowhere, Mississippi, but we have a major university here. Mississippi State University is here, and we recently, just to illustrate this point, we just found out that, so we do this big concert event. Um, it No, this is not what I'm looking for. I'm trying to pull up the name. This is how bad I don't know. Oh, there it is. Okay. Um, so I don't know top hits. In fact, as a librarian, I couldn't tell you what's on the bestseller list. I have no idea. I
Right.
have no clue. Um, my guess is if James Patterson or John Grisham put out a book this year, they're on it. That'd be my best I could do.
They're probably doing pretty
Um,
good.
yeah, probably. But like they do this big thing called Bulldog Bash, and it puts like I don't know how many people. They do it downtown on Main Street, and it literally fills the street, like building to building, for like 5 blocks,
Hmm.
like 10,000, 12,000 people in the street. Um, and it's big concert. And so
Yeah.
this year they announced that they have Jason Derulo. And somebody told me that, and I was like, that's awesome. Who is that?
Yeah.
And they're like, you don't know? I'm like, no, I don't know.
No.
It's like, how do you? And their response, I love this response. Just to give you listeners, I need you to understand where the current state of music is, right? If you don't know who Jason Derulo is, I'm going to tell you the same thing they told me. How do you get on TikTok and have not heard Jason Derulo?
Yeah.
Well, one, I really don't get on TikTok anymore. It's fine. But I, when they played me some of the songs, I was like, oh yeah, I have heard that. I've heard that. I didn't know his name, to which they responded, he says his name in every one of his songs. It's like, yeah, but I've heard the 30-second clip
Yeah. I heard the
on
commercial.
TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know who that is. I'm looking at the list now, and I don't know who the other support acts are either.
Couldn't.
So that
Yeah.
doesn't surprise me whatsoever.
It's weird, and that's just the whole thing. I think with just music now, everything can be so tailored to your own taste.
Yeah.
That it's like, oh, okay. And I mean, even like with pedal stuff, when I have like prototypes that I'm like trying out, that I'm like, this thing sounds awesome, and then a buddy's like, can I try it? I'm like, oh yeah, try our whatever drive, and they're like, mm-mm. And I was like, what are you talking about? It sounds great for punk rock, and they're like, yeah, but for country it sucks. I'm like, who plays country? And they're like, well, clearly not you. I'm like, yeah, no. So like getting out, like you got to find like different people's taste for different things.
Yeah.
And
that's why there's 11 billion 3-knob overdrives.
Totally. Yeah.
11 billion.
Well, mine
there's
has
like
6.
you got a couple of 3-knob overdrives.
Yeah, there's a couple in there.
Yeah,
there's a couple.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, and listeners, I'm so sorry. Y'all have to listen to my story several times. Mark has never heard this story unless he's listened to the episodes that I said it a million times. but it's like when I had Mike from Native Audio on here, and he talked about the fact that his pedals are incredible. He does this really sophisticated these digital delays and reverbs and stuff like that, and that's what he had. He didn't have an overdrive pedal at all in his lineup, and so he had these really sophisticated with presets and still in a single enclosure size, and they're awesome. And then he finally caved and did a 3-knob overdrive, and it immediately outsold everything else he's had.
It's funny how, like, I mean, without getting, like, in the weeds builder wise, like, everybody starts with overdrives just because they're not a very complex circuit. Like,
Yeah,
it's very easy to take a guitar signal and make it sound like a shitty guitar signal. Like, that's what overdrive is. You're just taking the signal and you're making it, like, compressed and crunchy. Like, yeah.
How can I make this sound bad in the best way?
Yeah. And it's sort of like, how do you know if your strobe light's bad? I don't know. It flickers. Well, that's what it's supposed to do. So
it just stays on.
you're like, well, it's one or the other. Yeah. So, like, but they're very simple to start out with, and you think, like, oh, then I'm gonna make a delay and a chorus and go all this crazy stuff, and it's like, but people still buy overdrives, and they want to have 100 of them. Like, I'm thinking, like, how many, like, different variants of just a hard clipping overdrive do I have, like, downstairs on my shelf? And I'm like, I lose count pretty quick. Like, or even just delay pedals. Like, I have so many delay pedals that I'm like, they all kind of just do the same thing to a point.
They really do. I was just counting real quick while we were sitting here because we had this conversation before we started recording about what my desk is a wreck right now. There are 6 overdrives on my desk currently. 3 of them are dual stage overdrives.
And I love them all equally.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love them all equally. But it's like, how many overdrives do you really need? Listeners, I know all the jokes, N
all
plus 1, all that, all of them. That is the correct answer. It's a lot like pizza. Once you've had one, you want to have them all.
Well, it's funny when I talked to so we did NAMM this past year, and we did the Stomp Box exhibit. So it was like 20 builders all in this tiny little footprint. And Paulo is the guy who organized and set up the whole thing. And I was talking to him and saying, like, oh, thanks for having us. And, like, it's so cool that, like, everybody in this pedal world is so nice and so cool to each other. And, like, you would think in any other business it would just be like, what are you doing? Stepping on my toes. Like, how dare you make a green overdrive? But, like, everybody is just, like, so nice to each other. And he's like, we're like baseball cards. You don't want one baseball card. You want all the baseball cards. I'm like, yes, this makes sense to me now. I totally get it.
That's it, because you're not truly in competition with each other, because if you put out, especially if you find the people like me who have, like, a favorite circuit or two, and then they buy everyone's version of that
variant.
Circuit.
Totally. Yep.
That's I had to stop myself getting that way with tone benders.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was a whole thing.
Dude, once you go down the fuzz rabbit hole, you are just like, I've always been more of, like, an overdrive distortion than a fuzz guy. Yeah. And I'm very thankful for that, because I know that, like, that would get out of control so fast.
It does real quick, and it gets expensive real quick because of, vintage components.
Oh, totally.
Stuff they don't make anymore. Worst part is, live, like, most of my gigging life, I've just used overdrives. I don't even use fuzzes live almost ever. Yet I refuse to tell you how many fuzz pedals I own.
Even not being a fuzz guy, I like, it's probably in double digits how many fuzz pedals I have, and then I'm like, I don't even like them that much. But I've gotten them over the years, but that's interesting. And then it's like, well, I should get rid of it. I'm like, well, I might need it one day. I'm not going to get rid of it. Are you crazy? No, it's going to sit on the shelf next to the other fuzz pedals.
And that's always been my thing. It's like, I play blues cover gigs and soul cover gigs and jazz in college, and it's like, you ever heard B.B. King play a fuzz pedal? No, there's a reason.
Yeah, right.
So that's not a tone I've needed.
But I like it.
Exactly, but I love it.
Yeah.
And today blues is a little different. You talk blues now, like, to a generation now, and they're instantly like, oh, Gary Clark Jr.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, great shout. great player, super nice the time I met him, long before it was actually when I was still working the bar circuit. Um, but that's not, and people think like Black Keys and that
Mhm.
kind of like fuzzed out blues. That's not the majority of the blues that's happening in the blues bars.
Mhm.
It's still the Three Kings kind of thing:
Sure.
Albert, Freddie, and BB. So, but I have a ton of fuzz pedals. I plug them all in as often as I possibly can.
It,
Um,
their pedals are fun toys. That's
yeah.
it's.
So speaking of fun toys, we've talked so long already, and now let's talk actually about your pedals. So
Told you
we've
I'm a talker.
established.
That'll happen.
Oh, it's fine. No, it's great. It makes for great conversations. I can already see some of the messages I'm going to get with people telling us we're insane, and that none of that makes sense, and that they absolutely don't buy 17 knob screamer overdrives just to have them.
Yeah.
You're lying. It's fine. Um, so I'm looking at your lineup. So you just started in 21,
Yep.
and you've already got currently on your website. Is it 10 total pedals?
Yeah, it's like 9 or 10. I think are up there right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's pretty rad. You're not quite as bad as Jordan over at Poison Noises, who managed to like release like 17 in his
Yeah, they
first
did like a
year.
bunch all at once.
Yeah, I was like, Jordan, come on. But I made the joke about being a lunatic, naming it like this thing that everybody has a negative connotation
Yeah.
for. But I genuinely actually love the whole concept. I think the first one I ever saw was the pep rally fuzz,
Oh, okay.
and
Well,
and I
thank you.
think it was I'm trying to remember who had it. Maybe was doing a demo of it
We sent out a
and told
couple
me
of
about
those.
it. Yeah, it may have been Joan of Heart. I don't maybe or maybe it was Emily over at Get Offset. I feel like it was one of them. But maybe I'm wrong. You there. I've made enough friends that do demos
Yeah,
that I
right.
don't know who does what anymore. But the thing, and this, so of course, it's a 3 knob overdrive, but I adore the graphics on yours. Like when I saw the Trash Panda, that's when I was like, oh no, I like what this guy's doing. Like, come
so,
on.
what's funny is like I said, it started where I was like, I just want to pedal with my dog on it. We have two black schnauzers named
Mm-hmm.
Gus and Gladys. We got them over during COVID, like two little rescue dogs, and I was like, that's when I started building pedals, and I was like, I'll never have a signature overdrive, but you know what? Gus deserves a signature overdrive. So when I did, I was like, I'll make 12 of them. I'll have one, and like 11 will sit on the shelf. And like
Right.
maybe if somebody comes over, they're like, "What's those?" I'm like, "I don't know. It's a funny story. You want one?" Or like whatever. But like I put them up like, yeah, pre-order. I'm gonna make like a 12, and I'm like, oh, we just got 13 pre-orders. I'm like, oh, I guess I have to make more than 12 now. So like, and once I did that, I was like, well, Gladys needs her own signature one too. So I made that one, and then it was like, oh, I think you have a company now. Like you have orders and a website. Like I think you have to start like doing this. And we weren't on like the whole school theme yet. It was like I don't know. So I just started like making stuff that I was like, we made like the Bootster Booster because it's impossible to come up with a pun for a boost pedal anymore that isn't already taken.
I'm about to say that's not taken.
So that was, yeah. So we did that one, and we're like, but once we hit, and then we did like the Stone Thrower Fuzz is like a local landmark in our town where like there's an Irish neighborhood called Tipperary Hill, and like all the bars are there. We played tons of gigs over there. Like my parents met at a bar over there. My dad grew up over there, and so there's an upside down traffic light because uh, in like the 1920s when it was the one traffic light in town, all the Irish kids saw the red on top as like England's rule over Ireland, so they kept throwing rocks and breaking the light. And every time the city fixed it, they kept smashing it. So the city was like, if we give you one with green on top, will you stop smashing it? And the kids were like, yeah. So we have the only upside down traffic light in this Irish neighborhood.
That's beautiful.
And it's like a local, so it's like a local landmark where like all the bars have upside down traffic lights in them. There's like, you always see like t-shirts and flags and stuff. So we put out the Stone Thrower, and it's a fuzz pedal because what's more punk rock than smashing traffic signals when you're,
Oh, it's true.
so it's a fuzz pedal. So we put it out on St. Patrick's Day. And when you click it, all three lights of the traffic light up. So it's like a local thing. So we did that, but when I started doing shows like pedal shows and NAMM and stuff, I was like, I got so tired of telling that story. So we're like, I think I have like 2 left in stock. And I'm like, we're discontinuing that. And that, what would have been version 2 is the pep rally. So we're like,
Okay.
loud and proud. There we go. It ties in. So I get the version 2 of that other one because I'm sick of, because originally I was like, we're just a local thing. And then once it's like, oh no, you're getting orders from more
From all over.
places, and like you're doing shows in New York City where nobody knows why there's a traffic light. So it started kind of like grow, and then when I wanted to do a delay pedal, I was like, oh, the snow day delay because I'm a teacher. That's great. And then that clicked, and it was like, oh, they should all be like school themes.
Yes, school
And that's
theme.
where it's like the Trash Panda was already rolled up, but we're like, we're retconning that. There's going to be something next year that involves that ties the Trash Panda into a school theme, which I'm real excited about. So we're
Oh,
starting.
very cool.
Things are going to start tying. We've got to start like either discontinuing or like tying up loose ends to keep everything on theme.
Yeah. Well, and that's cool. And so that basically means listeners, if you're listening this episode so recently after it's come out, go over to summerschoolelectronics.com and grab the stone thrower or the trash panda while they're available, because while the circuit may live on, it does in the stone thrower at least a little bit. I think
Yeah,
you added a tone knob to it
yeah.
for the pep rally.
The version 2 has a tone knob, like a tilt EQ that you would kind of tone knob you'd find like a Big Muff style, where it rolls
Okay.
off the highs or the lows. It doesn't really boost the mids. It just kind of takes away like what is kind of making you're not happy with. And then we added a boost on the back end of it. So it's an because the original was like a fuzz face style where like you had to kind of dime it just to kind of really keep it around. Um, I mean, they had a little extra around Unity, but like, you had extra. But like nowadays, I think most guitar players, when they plug into a pedal, they expect noon to be Unity, and they should be able to get a little bit more. And
I do, and I've definitely played a few pedals recently. Did a couple of videos for some where I was like, wow, I've really got to crank this to get to Unity.
yeah,
But then also it's the same thing I warn people. My favorite overdrive, I'm going to be super cheesy. My favorite overdrive is still the King of Tone. I
I
like
get
it
it.
above
It's
all
great.
others. But at the same time, when people try it, I tell them the same thing. I'm like, you need to not be afraid to crank those knobs a little bit. Noon is not going to give you what you think it's going to give you.
Well, and that's this. So that's the same thing. Um, our Gladys pedal was built on a blues breaker because
Mm-hmm.
that's what I when I first made those two. I used a blues breaker as like a lighter drive, and I used like a modded Gus is like a modded DoD 250. That's like my harder drive. So but one of the issues with blues breakers, just the way the circuit's built, there's not a lot of volume on tap. Like
Yeah.
Unity is like 3 o'clock on blues breakers. So we just released Gladys version 2, and we added like
Mm-hmm.
2 band EQ. And one of the things we fixed was it has way more volume. So like when you do it now, like noon, depending on where you have the drive set, is going to be right around Unity. And I still like version 1. I still have version 1 on one of my boards, but like I understand it from a customer's. If they're you don't have me saying this conversation, then they're going to be like, "Oh, is mine broken? I really got to push it." I'm like, that's what a blues breaker is. And
Right.
unless you're a connoisseur of that one style, you shouldn't know that. Like that's an insane thing for to expect people to know, you know.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like our big push this year was like take some of the ones we had and kind of like just tighten it up and be like, all right, well the Stone Thrower wasn't really on brand, and I wish it had more volume, so it becomes the Pep Rally and we add the volume. I like Gladys. I wish it had more volume, a little more tonal options. Version 2 corrects that. So that's kind of like where, and then now we kind of have more of a vision of like the school theme of what we're doing going forward, you know?
Yeah. It's it's definitely a fun theme. And let's be honest, I've had this conversation with builders on the podcast before. At this point, if you want to if you want people to notice your pedal company, if you're going to start a pedal company, you lunatic listeners, um, you better have something that grabs people's attention, and it can't always be what it sounds like, because
Okay.
you've got to have something that's going to get people drawn in a little bit. I always tell people a story is really good. Like, don't get me wrong, the story around the stone thrower is really compelling, but I could also see where it gets really old
It's a
telling that
long
story
story.
over and over again.
Well, and I think one of the things we kind of figured out like the snow day was so huge for us, and that was I think our fourth or fifth pedal we put out.
Mm-hmm.
Was so my buddy Steve, who like we've been playing in bands. He was in my first band. Like I played drums and he played guitar when we were like 14 or 15 or something. And he plays in the cover band with me. I play guitar. He plays bass now. He did all of our like T-shirts for the cover band. So when I started pedals, I'm like, hey man, can you make a pedal with my dog on it? Like I did a mock-up. Can you make like a not bad version of this? And he did that. And then he's grown like as an artist, and he's like identified the brand where we're like, okay, we need to have a central image. We have to do this with the colors. We have to make it bright. Like, as much as I love an all black pedal with white font that says, like, heaviest metal you've ever heard, like, yeah, but that's also not me. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm like, I don't. This is like, all these pedals I think are my kind of sense of humor. It ties into teaching, it ties into just fun. And, like, we put fun little Easter eggs. Um, on like the pep rally, if you look where there's so the image is like a football field and there's the crowd around it, like the banner that's above the crowd, if you like look in super close, it says go Tigers. The school I work at, our mascot is the Tigers. And
Okay.
so like and our colors are gold and blue, and like I have a guitar club that we started at our school that's super cool and the kids are into it, and like we have a bunch of acoustic guitars got donated and we're playing. And I brought this all the stuff in to show them, like, this is how we got the guitars. Like, it had tied in with me doing pedals and all that. And I was like, so you guys have an Easter egg on this pedal. And it says, go Tiger. Like, that's you guys. You're the guitar club. And they were like, that's so cool. So, like, all these little, like, 12-year-olds are like, that's amazing. So I'm like, yeah, you guys get it now? So, like, I like that we can work in, like, little cute things like that, you know?
Yeah, no, that's super cool. And once again, story. And then on top of that, I listened to some demos as we were prepping for today's episode because I've not played these in person yet, so they sound really really great.
Thank you.
Uh, I also love talking about the snow day. I love a delay with two delays where you can dial them in. I have another. I think the other one I have is the Wave that does that
Okay.
by Fox Pedal.
Oh, okay.
There's two pedals with Fox in the title, and I get them mixed up, and I don't have my glasses on, and it's on my shelf over
Like,
there,
that
and I
blurry
can't read it.
spot, that's the one.
Yeah, that blurry box over
Yeah.
there.
Well,
It's discontinued now. They've shut down operation of their pedals. They're just selling off whatever they've got in. I think it's Fox Pedal. Now I need to know because I've got listeners yelling at their
they're
screen right now.
they're just
It
smashing
is
their
Fox
phones.
Pedal.
There
It
you
is
go.
Fox Pedal, the Wave. Um,
Yeah, the snow day delay,
so
like I had a delay pedal with a tap tempo, and I would just always do the thing of like we'd start the song like, no, it's not totally right. And I find that like this is a me thing, you can get so obsessed with is the tap tempo the correct tempo of the song? If you're not
yep.
playing to a click or whatever, and it's like you're totally missing the whole point of playing guitar because you're so worried like is that flashing light lining up with the snare drum? And it's like no, I'm like so really I need a short delay and I need a long delay. And
Mm-hmm.
I only want to eat up one power supply spot. So I built this, and when I was doing the prototypes, some friends, everybody's like, "Can I do both at once?" I'm like, "Well, no, it's one or the other. That's the point." They're like, "It should do both at once." And like everybody said that, and I'm like, "Well, now I got to redesign the whole thing to make it do both at once." So the way I joke at like shows, I'm like, "Well, if the switch is down, it's your old man 3-knob delay, and you can set a slow time and a fast time. You can switch on the fly. If the switch is up, we call it blizzard mode because
Yeah.
it's snow day and we live in Syracuse, New York. You can run both of them at the same time, or you can flip it and it'll do them independently. So you get like the ping pong, like the da 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 da, and all the weird kind of stuff. So I'm like, if you want to be an old man, turn the switch down. If you want to get shoegazy and weird, turn it up, and then you can go get nuts. And I think,
I love it.
well, I think that feature, especially now with like pedals are like a saturated market. Like there's a lot of different builders right now, and
Yeah.
with like reverb, like you can find whatever you want. Um, my goal is like I want a pedal that I release to like functionally work in a band setting. I should be able to bring it to a gig, plug it in, and I should know how to use it in the moment. But it should also be fun to play on its own. Like if you have that blizzard mode going and you're playing and you tilt a knob like a quarter turn or whatever, you're like, oh, it's totally different. Like it's fun to play the pedal. but it's also a functional tool in a band setting. So that's like, and that's the same with like the science fair and all that stuff. Like you could just get lost just turning knobs a little bit because the sounds are so different. You know what I mean? But you could also just find your setting, bring it to a gig, and you're like, I'm good. I got it.
And I'm a big believer, like I say believer, the way I use delay and tremolo while I'm at it. I could care less if they line up with the time of the song,
Yeah.
unless there are times where maybe you've got a super choppy trim, for example. And yeah, that probably needs to start at the tempo of the song, or
Sure.
but you're gonna drift.
Mm-hmm.
You're humans. Things drift. That's just the way it works. I with delay, I don't want it to time with the song because then the point is not for all the repeats to be on the quarter
Yeah.
notes, or it's to give a vibe and a feel out of it. The before I say this, I need to. It's not the first delay pedal I ever owned. I think it was the second delay pedal I ever owned because the first delay pedal I ever owned was a Boss DD5,
Yeah.
forever ago, and I did not click with the DD5
Oh, that's my
at all.
favorite. That's my favorite one.
I have a different opinion now because I understand things
Mm-hmm.
more than I did, but at the time it was so clean and so pristine, and it didn't work for what I was expecting out of it. Turns out, by the way, I just like tape delays.
Yeah.
That's just who I
There
am.
you go. Yeah.
I like tape delays. I like literally the polar opposite of the digital delay.
Now, yeah, now it
As
makes sense.
Yeah, as weird and glitchy and just moody. And I mean moody in that it sets the mood, and moody that the device itself is moody, and the settings may not sound the same from day
Yeah.
to day. Apparently that's what I like.
Well, I'll be surprised.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I want to happy accidents
That's like
and
I
work
run all
with
I
them.
run all my pedals on batteries because I don't know what they sound like when I click on them. I like to be surprised. It's dangerous.
Actually, I have an opinion on the whole batteries thing and pedals. We'll come back to.
A lot of hot takes.
Oh man, it will make people angry. But so the second delay pedal I ever owned was the DLS Effects, which they're still around, which surprises me. I still see their pedals occasionally. I used to have a reverb search up for them, but they did one that was called the Echo Tap. And they did these interesting enclosures. They still do. They're sort of angled, sort of like Thorpe effects, but they don't have like the outer edges like
Okay.
Thorpe's do. I'm trying to think of another. I don't think anybody else uses the enclosure they use. So,
Okay.
but I found this. I think I bought it off a guy on like the Seymour Duncan forums in like the early 2000s, right? So, but it had a two settings for delay settings, just like that. You could set two different times, right?
Mm.
But one of them was set by the tap. So you had a tap.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
And
Okay.
you set it by a tap, and then you could swap between them. I may be misremembering this a little, but I think this is something like how it goes. And the other one is set by a knob, but the knob is not a continuous variable resistor potentiometer.
Oh, so it's
It's
like
a notched.
oh,
So
okay.
yeah, it was notched. So it had exact times at notch. So if you're like, there was no way you could
Oh, like a
set that
rotary
knob at
switch
the
you're
time of
talking.
your
I see what
like a
you're saying.
rotary
Okay.
switch that was notched. And so it was like, in fact, I'm going to pull it up just so I can see, because I'm sure they still make it or a variation of it. Worst case scenario, the internet never forgets things. So
No, I get
yeah,
that. But it's
there it is,
weird.
the Echo Tap. So yeah, it had a knob in the center that you could set it for 50 milliseconds, 100,
Yeah.
150, 200, 225, 250, 280, 300. That 280 is really throwing me off. 350, 400, all the way up to 3 seconds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And you could set individual volumes for each, whether it was the tap or the echo. They called it the Echo 1 delay time. And then the tap is, I guess, technically an Echo 2. So you
I'm
can
getting
switch
like
between them.
stressed out just thinking like, yeah, I know how you would do that. And as you keep listing stuff, I'm like, wow, that'd be a pain in the ass to figure out
Yeah.
how to do. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to build that.
And for the record, it's still available. I'm looking at the website that I pulled up is Rudy's Music in New York. They're currently on sale for $168.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. But I loved that delay because it was like the first one where I had the two. Now you
Yeah,
can't do them simultaneously, but you had these two settings in one pedal. So, like you talked about, I used the middle knob to set like the perfect slap back
yeah,
delay because I could set it at the exact time I
that's what I do.
wanted.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then
mine.
use the tap to do my longer delays.
Yeah, I'll just mine. I use like for like the '90s cover band when we do like fastball the way you need that like slap back for the solo. Like you just set one for that. I'm like the blue lights for that song, and then the yellow light. I'm like I put it at like 11 o'clock. That's my standard. Like blah 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 blah. That's fine. I just need to that. I just need to something to make solos be a little fatter. It's fine. And I'm
E-
like,
Everyone needs to play in a '90s cover band. By the way, I think
dude.
that's 100% true.
I mean, it's not that hard. You go for
No,
it.
we
And
used
that's
to
a,
play we used to play Meet Virginia by
mhm.
Train, which might actually be early 2000s and not 90s, but either way.
Well, we got real. I
Um
don't know that one, but there's so many that we got real good at. People are like, "You should play Stacy's Mom." We're like, 2001, man, not happening.
it's not in our decade,
Yeah,
dude.
everyone's like, "What do you do? Like '80s Joe?" We're like, exactly. But we're like, and then the other you get to so many good ones where people are like, "Why didn't you play whatever?" I'm like, "Listen, I just compressed 10 years into 3 hours. Not everything makes the cut. I'm sorry."
And the people expect you to be a human jukebox.
Yeah,
And I'm like and sometimes I just look at them and I'm say, "Hey, we don't rehearse.
yeah.
I just need you to understand that. We all have day jobs. We don't rehearse. We get together and like individually try to learn songs and then hope it goes well."
Or the one of I'll give you $20 if you play the song.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I will gladly take your money, and I will try my hardest, but neither of us will be happy with the outcome. Like I don't know the song. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And these other three
I
guys, they don't even know it either.
someone gave me $100 to play Black Velvet once, the Atlanta Miles
Oh
song.
yeah.
I'm like, I give me a couple of minutes
Yeah.
because I'm not going to turn down $100,
Yeah.
right?
You're so
So I'm
torn.
like, okay, let me see what I can remember from singing along to it on the radio.
Yeah.
And we made it work.
Yeah.
And they were pretty happy with our version, but I'm like, was not the
Oh
recording.
yeah.
It was not the song.
It got you the $100.
It got us the $100.
There you go.
But it's funny, we would play these no, sorry, now I'm saying it. We'd play these cover band gigs, and we do like some of the big anthemic songs. Like, of course we did. We had a great singer that she just had this really big range, so she could do all like we would do Journey, Don't Stop Believing because you're supposed to, and she
Because you're supposed to.
yeah,
Because
and
you
she
have.
hits
It's in
those
the
notes and
contract.
kills it. Yeah, it's in the contract. It really is. But we would do Meet Virginia. And like, so we were doing all these anthemic songs. And then we get to Meet Virginia, and there's this really silly, like, minimal, like, part in between the verses that's just like, doon, doon, doon. It's like
Hmm.
three notes, right?
Yeah.
One of the biggest cheers from the crowds was when play those three notes in this little break between. I'm like,
It's
really?
so weird. Yeah.
Or we would play Toxic by Britney Spears, and people hear that. Do 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 do.
Yep.
They love that.
So in my original band, those guys have all been pushing like because they know that like the '90s bands have been doing it for a while, and they're like, we should do a 2000s. And my other guitar player, anytime it comes up, I'm like, I don't want to do that. He'll just like, like that's his go-to. He's like, I mean, come on, we got it. Let's do it. I'm like, no, it's just.
It's such a fun song to play. No bones about it. It's a fun song to play.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
I have no
But
desire to learn it.
it's like four chords, just like every other pop song on the
Yeah,
planet.
totally. You're right.
It's fun.
But
Also, it's got that really great surf guitar solo section.
oh,
It's like this heavy tremoloed surf guitar moment.
okay.
Oh, go back and listen to it. You can fast forward straight to the guitar solo, but
I will say
it's fine.
the cover band has been super helpful with the pedal company because when you play gigs every weekend and you're like, I have this new prototype for this new Big Muff variant, whatever. I'm like, I'm gonna try it, and then you quickly learn like, oh, it works for this, doesn't work for that. Oh, it works kind of here. This is different. I can adjust. And I know what I got to fix on Monday, and it makes it.
Oh, this is surprisingly susceptible to neon light interference.
And it's great because you can try stuff at your house, but like you're obviously trying it on the same wiring with the same amps in an isolated setting, and you're like, you know how to make your stuff sound good at your house. That's why you live
Right.
there, and that's why you
Yeah.
bought that. But like when you're going, you're like, all right, we're playing this like dumpy club, and the wiring is probably not going to pass code. Let's see what happens when I plug in a fuzz pedal. And you're like, we should probably account for that.
Yeah, this is a conversation I have actually literally had earlier today in a Facebook chat group with some other podcasters. We were talking about um, the modeling world because actually I was talking to Matt from the Guitar Dads podcast. He just bought this really great amp. He bought an Amplified Nation something or other. I can never remember all Amplified Nation's models, but he bought this really beautiful amplifier. You know, finally settled into what I call an end game amplifier. Like you don't actually get better from here, you just get different.
Yeah.
Um, but he doesn't gig it. He plays in a cover band, and they gig pretty regularly. But he's not going to gig it because they're all on in ears, and he's using an HX Stomp, which don't no shade. I
No.
gigged a Helix for a while, but when I tell people about this, I'm like, I need you to understand that the caliber of clubs you're playing and what I've been playing as a blues musician are
Yeah.
very, very different places. I don't play places where I trust the wiring, the PA, or the sound guy enough to go direct.
Yeah. It's well, and it's weird. I know. I'm sure this is an isolated thing, and like I've talked to different players who are like describing what they need and like what they want, and I'm like, you want a Kemper, you want a Helix for what
Yeah.
you're saying and what you're requiring for your setup and your band, whatever. Like, yes, that is the solution to your problem. For me personally, like I love hearing my amp pushing air behind me with the drums. I just really just want vocals through the monitor, but I like having if there's too much guitar in the monitor, I just feel really weird hearing it from the front. So I'm used
Mm-hmm.
to hearing it behind me, you know? And like
I'll get timid if
it's
it's too
weird.
much coming at me from two angles. I'll get
Yeah.
timid about my playing because it's assaulting me.
Yeah, it's just very strange. And so but we did a gig where there was at like a casino and there was an 80s band playing and then we did our 90s thing, right? And the 80s band was all like Kemper, all modeling stuff, right? And
Sure.
then they had keyboards, they had electronic drums, and even the drums were like samples. So every song, the snare drum sounded just like the real one, right?
I hate it. I hate
So,
this.
so I was like, I understand what they're doing. It's not for me, but I get it. And I was like, we're at the bar having a full voice conversation, and this is fine because the sound guy kept them at such a reasonable volume.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, that's weird. And when our drummer walked in, like with his cymbal bag, somebody was like, "Oh, are you guys actually going to play tonight?" And I was like, "Oh, they think they're lip syncing, like, because you don't feel the kick drum, you don't
Yeah.
feel the air." And I was like,
You don't see amps on stage.
"Yeah," and
So
like, well, you just didn't even feel it. Like, it was so weird because like, and they were great. They sounded just like the record, like almost to a fault. That I'm like, "Oh, just have a DJ." And like, I could see like they were trying, they were doing their thing. It was great. They sounded good. They were a good band, but you just didn't feel it. You didn't just that little bit of like the subs were going, but it just wasn't the same as hearing a real kick drum. Because as soon
yeah.
as we set up and we were like, all right, we're gonna play, and then we'd like hit the first note and just like let your like Vox ring out with a chord. Suddenly people were like, oh, and I'm like, weird, and I'm like, I don't know. And again, modeling is perfect for a lot of gigs. I know a lot of
Yes.
dudes who play like in churches where it's like we have to. That's the room. That's what we got to do. And I'm like, I get it. That's totally cool. I understand. But just hearing the two different like in that kind of like setting, I'm like, oh yeah. If you're like so close to the record that it's like, what are you doing?
Also, it's really interesting that whole with when he walks in with cymbals and said, "Oh, you're gonna play tonight." Like everybody's like, "Oh, the audience can't tell the difference."
Yeah, they can.
You're right. They can't, and when they don't see you playing things on stage, they think you're faking it.
Yeah, and it was very strange to see because I remember being like thinking, I'm like, oh, they're like an 80s band, and they were doing all the hits, like all the 80s, and I was like, they should have this room just dancing and
Packed
going
out and
crazy,
moving.
and I'm like, there was some, but I'm like, and we started playing like our stuff, and I was like, oh, And that's why I was like, it's going to be a light night where there's not a lot of dancing. I'm like, oh, these people are not to like toot our own horn. Like I don't want to make
Yeah.
come off like arrogant or whatever. But it's like I was shocked that I'm like, oh, these people are like they're feeling like the thump of the kick. They're hearing the
Yeah.
guitars. There's a lot going on, you know.
And it's important to say what we're talking about is not volume
No,
necessarily.
it's just like the frequency and like the vibration and the response of it. Because like yes, on paper everything was coming through exactly correct, but it
So
just
to put this in a player's perspective a little bit, um, uh, I play in these bands. I'm not a big like, I know you musicians. I'm not a big like drugs guy or pot guy or anything like that. It's not a big part of my life, right? Not a thing. But the closest I think I've ever been to fully understanding the experience, the reason people go to these substances,
yeah.
have been when I've been playing with a band, whether it's mine or another, and there's this moment on stage, and this is a hard spot to get to. It's not an every night thing. It's
Mhm.
maybe not more than a couple of times a year. But like you're on stage, you're in the right spot, the volume's the right place, everybody's in the pocket, and you're playing, and it's this totally other experience. The way, oh, this is so hippy dippy, and I'm so sorry, y'all, but there's this way that music and sound wraps around you physically
Mhm.
that you're not getting with those other things. And when I tell people that I don't do the modeler thing because it doesn't motivate me to play, this is that other part of it that's really hard to explain when you're on stage and you're playing in a band, and it's not about volume, it's about this other experience, like, and you're wrapped up in it.
And
And
there's a weird thing you just reminded me of that. I remember I had to be like a teenager, had my PV Bandit 112, and
yeah.
like you're playing and you're standing directly in front of it. You're getting that laser beam of death frequency, right? And
Mm-hmm.
as soon as you take that step, that you're standing like 45 degrees off center, and you're like, oh my god, this is the greatest guitar sound I've ever heard. And as you
Mm-hmm.
kind of walk back and forth, you can hear the guitar sound kind of warble of like what it's the same sound, but
Yeah.
where you're standing is like, oh, this is different. And like that's to the audience too. When you're playing real amps and like especially those small gigs where everything's not mic'd up, you're just using stage volume.
The
As the
majority of my gigs.
Yeah, that's what I do. Like when the band or when the audience is like goes to the bar, it sounds different than when they're standing at their table or when they're standing up front or they're standing back and you're like, oh, it's just a different experience versus like I'm modeling a 57 that's sitting right here and not moving for the entire like it's such a subtle thing that you're like I'm sure someone's going to argue and be like it doesn't make a difference. But
And they are welcome to that
and
opinion.
that's fine. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'm crazy, but if this is what crazy is, it sounds really cool.
Right, exactly.
I'm into
It
it.
Well, here's the deal, and I tell everybody this. Mick over at that pedal show says this all the time. It's all in your head anyway.
Yeah.
Literally everything we experience is in our head. So it's telling us that it's in our head the way it sounds. It doesn't really sound like that. Well, if it's in my head,
Yeah.
that's how it sounds to me. And that whole standing in the right spot. Like for example, I have this amp directly behind
Sure.
me, and that cabinet's got a 15-inch speaker, and it is pointed directly at me.
Yeah.
And I challenge anyone who wants to tell me that 15-inch speakers are too dark, because right here where I'm sitting, that thing just punches me in the back of the head with upper mids and high end.
Yeah.
But if I stand up and I'm up above it or I'm to the side of it, it just fills out and becomes this absolutely perfect sound.
The whole thing
And
I've told every guitar student I've ever had or anybody I've been in a band with, if you have a combo amp, buy a chair or an amp stand.
mhm,
Like do not put your combo amp on the floor cuz your knees are going to think it sounds amazing. And everybody who's standing 30 feet away from you
mhm,
is going to be deaf because you're going to
mhm,
crank that so you hear them. Like, but if you put it up in the air, you're going to hear it at ear level, so your volume will be way better. But also, like, you're going to get that sound. You're going to be able to like move back and forth and find the sweet spot and be like, "Ooh, this is great!" And like, you can dial it in so much more. Like, just put it on a chair,
yeah.
lift it up, and
That's
like,
why I always take a plexiglass shield. I take my own shield of shame. or barrier of shame to every gig, just in case I need it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. You know.
I uh so when we started playing more and more gigs, so I went through my half stack phase where I was hauling around a JCM 900 and a
Oof.
1960 412 because we were a punk rock band.
Weren't they great days? Don't you miss
Was,
that a little?
I was talking to someone today. I'm like, I don't know when the last time I took that 412 out of my garage was. I I don't even remember when, and it's not even like pre-COVID. Like it was pre-COVID. I don't even know when the last time I took it out. But I'm like,
It was pre-gray hairs. It was
yeah,
like,
totally,
yeah,
yeah.
before I had any of those.
And I was like, but I've been using a Vox AC15. I love it. And there was so many times where I'm like, I should probably get an AC30. And every time I go to the store and pick one up, I'm like, I don't need an AC30 because I have a road case that I keep the AC15 in that I've just had
Mhm.
forever, and that doubles as my amp stand. Just put it on top of the road case. It's the perfect height. It's right there. And but I realized years ago, I'm like, any gig that you're playing where you're just crank it, AC15 is going to do it. You will have the
Yep.
volume you need. If you don't have the volume you need, they're going to mic it. And like I've been doing that for so long, and the only time it's ever like come back to bite me is if we go play somewhere and they're like, you guys are outside tonight, right? And like, oh, well, we didn't bring, we just brought our normal PA system to play in the bar, and they're like, oh, I guess we got to push it tonight, guys. I'm like, you'll get through it. It's not
Yeah.
ideal, but you'll get through it. Um,
Yeah. I find in those situations, the thing that gets hurt the most actually ends up being the vocals.
yeah, and
It's
that's
just hard time getting the voices up.
and we've had people be
'Cause-
like, how come you guys aren't projecting out there tonight? I'm like, well, because we thought we were playing in a tiny room, so we brought 15-watt amps. Our drummer brought a Birch drum kit that's super quiet. Like our bass rig is only like 250 watts. Like it's nothing crazy. And I'm like,
Mhm.
this wasn't the environment we were told. I mean, we'll do it and we'll get through the night, but like in it, other than that situation, you're fine. Like we've played big festivals and like the band before us has full stacks, and we're like, all right, well, you will be loading that out for the like our entire set. Here's my AC15. Throw the
Right.
throw your
Which
57 on it. We're
which is
good.
a very loud amplifier.
Yeah,
People have come to believe that 15 watts isn't loud,
yeah.
and you're just wrong.
And the other thing is like they're affordable. Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I
I
had
saw one sell literally today or yesterday used for like $325.
I bought one years ago off somebody off Craigslist, and I got it that day, and I threw it in the trailer, and we were like going on tour that afternoon to leave, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna bring this as a backup because I got room and it's super cheap. And I had a buddy like mod it, and I don't know what he did. He just said like, this is before I knew like anything about electronics. He was like, I put it to 60 specs. I'm like, I don't know what that means. All I know is the best sounding AC15 I've ever heard. Like
Gotcha.
the bass and treble knobs just cover such a wider frequency than like stock ones, and just sounds better. And other people who have AC15s will play it and be like, what is it? I'm like, I don't know, but it's magical and I love it. But again, living in the Northeast in the wintertime, when it's in a road case, I have like stairs down the side of my house. They're just covered in ice.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what? They're cheap enough. I'm gonna just buy a second one and leave it in my car so I don't have to like an AC15 is cheaper than back surgery. So
100%.
and I'm like, and if it ever dies, it's not that crazy expensive. It's not like was like, oh, I got like a bad cat or like something that's like some boutique hand
Yeah.
wired.
I
I'm
don't have
like,
a matchless in my
yeah,
car.
exactly right. And I'm like, all right, so it's a Vox AC15. It's fine. It's consistent, and I love it. And like I've used it for so long that it's like, hey, it's a little like tinny in here. I'm like, oh, twist the knob. Like, I got it. We're
Yep.
good.
Well, before we get here to the end of this episode, I do because I teased it. I need to talk about the battery thing. I'm just going to give my hot take, and it's a tempered hot take. So I'm sitting here looking at all the pedals sitting on my desk, right? Now I've got a bunch of them right now, and I'm not going to pick them all up because I'm working on demos of some of them. I'm way behind on and demos that I've promised just because summer in libraries gets insane. Uh, and then end of fiscal year. It's a whole thing. But my deal with batteries is my for a lot of gigs, um, especially the blues gigs, I'll show up with a combo, or maybe a head and cab, either way, whatever, a guitar, and I'll just bring a single pedal and just one pedal on the floor. Um, and now, and y'all, I too am a bit of an environmentalist, and I care about the environment and taking care, and like batteries are bad,
Yeah.
but of all the pedals on my desk right now, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, yeah, there's something under there, 9, 10, 11 pedals on my desk, one of them takes a battery.
Yeah, a lot of the newer ones just don't, like mine don't take
They just,
batteries.
yeah. And that's something that sometimes frustrates me, because I'm like, I just want to put an energizer in this
Yeah.
pedal and grab it and put it in my gig bag and not worry about taking a power supply or any of that junk, and just be able to plug in and go. And yeah,
Sorry.
so no, it's fine. It's a small rant. Like I said, it's a baby rant. It's the majority of players are using pedal boards now.
Yeah.
I I literally have a pack of batteries here sitting on my desk too, because I like to have backups.
I've had that
But
where you would have band practice as a kid, and let's go get lunch, and you'd come back. Someone left their DS1 plugged in on a bed, and you're like, well, band practice is over. We don't have
mm-hmm.
distortion anymore.
Or if you're a big wah pedal freak,
Yep.
like I was, like I never remembered to unplug my wah
Yeah.
pedal. Never.
I'm scarred by that, so I'm like, don't even give them the option of batteries. I've
Yeah.
learned.
No, I dig that. So, Mark, before we head over to Patreon and I ask you the hard-hitting questions over there, listeners, they're not that hard-hitting, but it is a lot of fun. I think we have a lot of fun discussing some more music-related, a little less gear-related stuff. Tell listeners everywhere they can find you, and anything you got coming up that's going on that's going to be fun.
So our website, summerschoolelectronics.com. Same handle on Facebook and Instagram and on YouTube and Threads. That's a thing too.
Oh yeah. I need to pay attention to my threads
Yeah,
again.
it's a thing. Somebody mentioned it today. I'm like, oh yeah, I have one of those. So I think I posted something today. But yeah, if you got any questions, you want to talk pedals, Instagram's probably the easiest way to reach out to get at me, or just shoot me an email, mark@summerschoolelectronics.com. What do we get going on? We just put out Gladys version 2. By the time this is airing, will be in October, and our Halloween pedal will be out. And I can show it to the viewers. I got one right here.
Yeah.
So the Science Fair is our most popular pedal, the Rat and Tube Screamer in parallel right there.
Yeah.
So starting October 1st, we did a limited of 31 Science Fears. And so it's the same circuit, but limited artwork of the lab rat drinking out of the test tube screamer, out of the test tube.
And I love 31. That's so perfect.
We did
for October.
Yeah, last year we did this, instead of the snow day delay, we did the spooky day delay, and we did 13 of them. And my wife made a bet with me where she's like, I bet you can sell 31 of them this year, Mike. She's like, you're bigger than that. You can do it. She's like, and I was like, trying to decide 13 or 31. And she's like, if you sell 31, you got to take me out to dinner. If you don't sell, I'll take you out. So we have a bet going. So,
oh, nice.
If you want my wife to win the bet, those are available exclusively at our online shop. So,
perfect. Well, also, I think you hinted, be looking out. You may have something else coming out in November
around Black Friday. We got something in the works, and yeah.
I have a theory Black Friday is going to be a big deal this year.
Probably.
Yeah, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of things going on, so y'all are going to want to be paying attention. All of the links that Mark just described are down below. I'll try to get all the social medias, but I'll definitely get the Instagram in there so you can find them easily, and the website. But other than that, there may be some more links. We'll see how I feel my ADHD brain in the middle of the night as I write the notes, because we're recording pretty well in advance of when this episode's going out. I still guarantee I won't do the notes for this episode until the night before it's going to go live, because that's just who I am as a human being. I can already feel so many of you resonating with that.
I feel like I'm amongst friends. That's totally, yeah.
I'm the same. We're all that kid. We're all that kid who did the paper the night before it was due.
Every night before a release, I'm like, we have everything set. Tomorrow's going to go so great. And then I wake up at 2 in the morning, I'm like, you didn't do that one thing. I'm like, oh no. Yeah, I do the same thing.
Love it. Awesome. Well, we're going to go over to the Patreon episode. Mark, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been a lot of fun. We talked about a lot of things. We said some things that are going to make people angry. That's always fun. And that makes great podcasting when someone comes away angry. I love the angry messages. I get some, actually, y'all, I don't get that many angry messages.
I'll send
But
you some.
no, awesome. Just,
Yeah.
whatever your anger is, Subway got your order wrong this time. It just rant to me. Then I'll talk about the fact that you're still going to Subway in 2023. Um, actually, I literally had Subway twice this week. Anyway, y'all, it's been great. It's been fun. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Remember to click subscribe, follow, bell icon, leave a comment. I don't care what the comment is. Just make it, I don't know, PG-13. Let's keep it there. Write a review if you could, if you're on Apple Music or Apple Podcasts, or if you're on Spotify. It really helps a lot. Remember to go over to Patreon if you want to help financially. That's great. That helps me a ton. Patreon.com/40watt podcast. In the meantime, y'all remember, be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise.